The little girl begged for mercy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Cedar Ridge, painting the wooden buildings in shades of gold and amber. The air was still and heavy, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain clouds that promised relief from the endless drought. It was the kind of quiet morning that made folks pause in their daily routines. Sensing that something important was about to unfold, Sarah Mitchell stood near the old wooden fence at the edge of town, her small fingers tracing the rough grain of the weathered posts. At 8 years old, she had learned to read the moods of her frontier community, and today felt different. There was a tension in the air, like the moment before thunder rolls across the plains. The sound of approaching horses broke the morning stillness. Sarah looked up to see Ezra Blackwood riding into town, his dark silhouette unmistakable against the pale sky. Behind him rode 3 of his ranch hands, their faces grim and purposeful. The sight sent a chill down Sarah's spine, though she couldn't say exactly why. Blackwood was known throughout the territory as a man who demanded respect and got it. His ranch sprawled across thousands of acres, and his word was law in matters that concerned his land and property. He was not a man who made social calls or came to town without serious business. As the riders dismounted near the town square, people began to emerge from their homes and shops. Word spread quickly in a small community, and soon a crowd had gathered. Sarah's mother, Mary Mitchell, appeared at her daughter's side, her face lined with worry. "What do you suppose brings Mr. Blackwood to town so early?" Mary whispered, more to herself than to Sarah. Sarah watched as Elena Martinez appeared from behind the general store, her grandmother's hand clutched tightly in her own. The girl was perhaps 9 years old, with dark hair that caught the morning light and eyes that held too much worry for someone so young. Elena and her grandmother had arrived in Cedar Ridge just weeks before, seeking work and shelter after losing their home to the relentless drought that had plagued the territory. Old woman moved slowly, her steps careful and measured. It was clear that illness had weakened her, though she tried to maintain her dignity despite their desperate circumstances. Elena stayed close to her grandmother's side, her small frame seeming to shield the older woman from the curious stares of the townspeople. Blackwood's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "Folks, I've come here today on a matter of theft." The word hung in the air like smoke, heavy and accusatory. "Someone has been taking water from my private well, water that belongs to me and my cattle." A murmur rippled through the crowd. In a land where water was more precious than gold, theft of such a resource was a serious crime. The punishment for stealing water could be severe, sometimes even deadly. Sarah felt her mother's hand tighten on her shoulder as they watched Elena's face go pale. The girl's eyes darted around the crowd, looking for an escape that didn't exist. Her grandmother seemed to shrink into herself, understanding that their worst fears were about to be realized. "I know who the thief is," Blackwood continued, his gaze settling on Elena, "that girl there, and her grandmother. They've been helping themselves to what doesn't belong to them." The crowd turned to stare at Elena, who took a step back, pulling her grandmother with her. The old woman whispered something in Spanish, her voice too weak to carry far, but Sarah could see the fear in both their faces. Elena straightened her small shoulders and stepped forward, leaving her grandmother's side. Her voice, when she spoke, was barely above a whisper, but it carried clearly in the still air. "Please, Sena," she began, her words carefully chosen. "Please, I took the water. Not my abuela, she is sick, and the town well. The water is not clean. She needs fresh water to get better." Blackwood's expression didn't soften. "The reason doesn't matter, girl. Stealing is stealing." Elena's composure cracked. She dropped to her knees in the dust, her hands clasped together in front of her. "Please, I beg you, have mercy. I will work for you. I will do anything, but please don't hurt my grandmother because of what I did." Tears streamed down the girl's cheeks, leaving tracks in the dust that had settled on her face. The sight of such desperate pleading from someone so young sent a shock through the assembled crowd. Some looked away, unable to bear witness to the child's pain. Others watched with the hard pragmatism that frontier life demanded. Sarah felt something stir in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name but couldn't ignore. She had lost her own father 2 years earlier, and she understood the fear of losing the only family you had left. Without fully realizing what she was doing, she stepped away from her mother's protective embrace. "Sarah," her mother whispered, urgently, but Sarah was already walking toward the center of the square. Every eye turned to watch the small figure moving through the crowd. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but something stronger than fear propelled her forward. She stopped a few feet from where Elena knelt and looked up at Ezra Blackwood. The rancher's eyebrows rose slightly. It wasn't often that a child inserted herself into adult business, especially business as serious as this. What is it, child? Sarah's voice was small but clear. Mr. Blackwood, my PA used to say that mercy wasn't about whether someone deserved it. He said it was about who we choose to be when we have the power to hurt someone. A murmur went through the crowd. Sarah's father, Thomas Mitchell, had been well respected in the community before his death, and his words still carried weight. Blackwood nodded slowly. Your father was a good man, Sarah, but good intentions don't change the fact that water was stolen from my land. Yes, sir, Sarah agreed, surprising everyone. Alina did take your water, but she did it because her grandmother is dying. She paused, gathering her courage. If it was your grandmother, wouldn't you have done the same thing? The rancher's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered behind his eyes. The crowd waited, barely breathing, as he considered the child's words. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Elena's not just asking for mercy, Mr. Blackwood. Look at her hands. All eyes turned to Alina, who was still kneeling in the dust. Her small hands were scraped and dirty, the fingernails broken and caked with earth. It was clear she had been digging. She's been trying to find something to trade for the water she took, Sarah explained. She's trying to make things right. Alina looked up through her tears, nodding slowly. My grandmother told me about a place. A place where my mother buried something before she died. A ring that belonged to my great-grandmother. I thought, I thought if I could find it. Her voice broke, and she gestured helplessly at the hard ground near the fence where she had been digging. But the ground is too hard, and I'm not strong enough. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Then, to everyone's amazement, Blackwood dismounted from his horse and walked over to where Alina had been digging. He knelt down and began to move the earth with his large, weathered hands. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the feared rancher dug in the dirt like a common laborer. His hands worked methodically, moving stones and roots that had defeated Elena's smaller fingers. After several long minutes, his hand struck something small and hard. He pulled out a simple gold ring, tarnished with age but still beautiful. Tiny flowers were etched around the band, and a small stone caught the morning light. Blackwood stood and walked back to Alina, who looked up at him with wonder and fear. This what you were looking for? He asked, his voice gentler than anyone had heard it before. Alina nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. It was my great-grandmother's wedding ring. Mama buried it to keep it safe when times got hard. Abuela said it was the only valuable thing we had left. Blackwood studied the ring for a long moment, then looked down at the girl kneeling before him. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made everyone lean forward to listen. Alina Martinez, he said formally, this ring is worth more than the water you took. Much more. Elena's face lit up with hope. Then then I can pay you back. But Blackwood shook his head. You can't pay me back, because there's nothing to pay back. Confusion flickered across Elena's face, and murmurs rose from the crowd. Rancher continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the square. The water you took, you can have it. As much as your grandmother needs, for as long as she needs it. Alina stared at him in disbelief. I don't understand. Blackwood knelt down so he was at eye level with the girl. Sometimes, child, the measure of a person isn't in what they own or what they can take. It's in what they're willing to give, when someone else is in need. He pressed the ring back into Elena's palm. This belongs to your family. Keep it. Remember where you came from, and remember that sometimes the most valuable things can't be bought or sold. The rancher stood and addressed the crowd. This girl risked everything to care for her grandmother. She was willing to face my anger, my punishment, even her own death, to get clean water for someone she loved. That kind of courage, that kind of love. That's not something we should punish. Elena's sobs echoed across the square. But now, they were tears of relief and gratitude. Gracias, Senna, thank you so much. But Blackwood wasn't finished. He looked around at the assembled townspeople. Alina, your grandmother is welcome to all the water she needs from my well. And when she's feeling better, if you want work, you can come to my ranch. Fair wages for fair work. The girl nodded eagerly through her tears. Yes, sir, yes, I promise. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Blackwood looking down at her with something that might have been respect. That was brave, what you did, he said quietly. Speaking up for someone when they couldn't speak for themselves. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. It just seemed like the right thing to do. Blackwood nodded. Your father raised you well, Sarah. Mitchell, he'd be proud of the woman you're becoming. As the rancher walked away, Alina approached Sarah with the precious ring clutched in her hand. Her grandmother leaned heavily on a walking stick, but her eyes were bright with gratitude. Thank you, Alina whispered. I don't know why you helped me, but ... Because it was right, Sarah replied simply. And because everyone deserves someone to stand with them when things get hard. Alina smiled through her tears. My abuela says that angels come in many forms. I think she was right. The two girls stood together in the fading morning light, an unlikely friendship born from a moment of courage and compassion. Around them, the town of Cedar Ridge settled back into its daily routine, but something had changed. A small act of mercy had rippled through the community, reminding everyone that even in the harsh reality of frontier life, there was still room for kindness. Sarah's mother appeared beside them, her face showing a mixture of worry and pride. Sarah, you could have been hurt, ... But she wasn't, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see Elena's grandmother, supported by two other women from the town. The elderly woman's face was gaunt with illness, but her eyes shone with dignity and gratitude. Alina translated her grandmother's Spanish words. She says that, your daughter has the heart of a lioness, but the wisdom to use her strength for protecting others instead of hurting them. The old woman pressed a small wooden cross into Sarah's hands. It was smooth from years of handling, carved with intricate details that spoke of patient, loving craftsmanship. She wants you to have this, Alina explained. It was blessed by the priest in our old village. She says it will remind you that kindness is never wasted, even when it seems small. Sarah looked down at the simple wooden cross, feeling its warmth in her palm. Tell her I'll treasure it always. As the families parted ways, Sarah realized that something important had happened in Cedar Ridge that morning. Ezra Blackwood's act of mercy, sparked by a child's courage, had shown the entire community that strength didn't have to mean hardness, and that true power came from lifting others up rather than keeping them down. The sun climbed higher in the sky, burning away the last of the morning shadows, but the warmth that filled Sarah's heart had nothing to do with the weather. She had learned that sometimes the smallest voices could speak the loudest truths, and that mercy, once given, had a way of multiplying like seeds scattered on fertile ground. In the weeks that followed, Elena's grandmother grew stronger with access to clean water, and Alina began working at Blackwood's ranch. The arrangement benefited everyone, and a deep friendship grew between the two girls that would last throughout their lives. And in the town of Cedar Ridge, people began to remember that mercy wasn't weakness. It was perhaps the greatest strength of all, and it could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities, one small act of kindness at a time.